Alright, so the results of the poll are in, and Baron won by a landslide. But, you might say, this isn't a Baron video. A lot of you in the comments made a pretty valid point that while it would be funny to look back at Baron's release, it hasn't actually been that long, it's only been about a year since that time. So I decided to go with the second choice being Cernunnos, who narrowly beat out Skadi and Medusa by 1 and 2% in the poll respectively. So let's get right into Cernunnos' release history. And of course, stay tuned to the channel for the next poll for this series to make your voice heard. Alright, so Cernunnos' release was a complete and utter shitshow. His passive was identical to what it is now, so I'm going to skip right over that. It's never been a particularly strong passive anyway, and hasn't needed any nerfs. But then we get into Cern's actual kit, and realise we want to end ourselves on uninstall Smite. Yeah, Cern's 1 was probably the most frustrating ability at launch, and anyone who was around for this release in early Season 4 will know what I'm talking about before I even go into any details. So Cern's 1 to this day remains a strong and versatile ability with a pretty high skill cap managing 4 different effects at once. Well, at release you could basically just leave Summer Heat stance on at all times and still dominate every single duo lane comp in existence. Yeah, Summer Heat used to be 4 times more potent than it is today, and even now it's very strong, considering it doesn't cost any mana like abilities like Jablanque's Bowlers do. I actually couldn't find any info on the base damage of Summer Heat at launch, it wasn't listed in the patch notes or anything, but even if we assume it's the same as what it is now, that's still 25 base and 20% scaling as extra damage for free on every auto attack. This 20% scaling was really what broke this ability anyway though, that's somewhere around 40 to 50 extra damage just in scaling once you reach full build with this guy. Add that onto the base damage and you're probably looking at around 60 to 75 damage depending on how much power you have on every single auto attack, that's just insane. But of course his 1 wasn't just Summer Heat, even if it sometimes felt like that with how much people abused it at launch. Cernunnos also had the Spring Growth section, the second insanely broken portion of this ability. If in some miracle edge case you actually got low on Cernunnos before insta-killing your opponents with Summer Heat, you can just activate this and get, you ready for it? 20% free lifesteal for 0 mana and no cooldown. Yeah, I know I just fisted Summer Heat for being broken, but this is honestly a close contender even if people didn't quite realise that at its release. Just for reference, a fully stacked Devourer's Gauntlet gives 24% lifesteal. Yeah, just becoming Shrek as this guy gives you almost a full Devos worth of lifesteal. So you could either ignore lifesteal items entirely and just rush into things like Icavol if you wanted to just out-damage everyone, or you could invest into lifesteal on top of this and just become invincible, so long as you hold left click with this buff active. The other 2 sections of this ability were obviously strong, but nowhere close to the summer and spring effects. Which, as I mentioned, kinda just led to Cern being a left click bot with Summer Heat, and if he got low, swapping to Spring, all the while never letting go of that left click. So that's a lot of bullshit to swallow on just one ability, but the rest of his kit wasn't lacking either. His 2 Bramble Blast had a slow on it at release. Yeah, this ability did a crap ton of damage, even more tick damage, rooted and slowed enemies, meaning you basically had around 3 to 4 seconds of the enemy barely being able to move and being unable to avoid your Summer Heat basic attacks. This was obviously an excellent wave clear, but where it really shined was in that boxing match, basically guaranteeing you'd hit your auto attacks if you hit this ability on the enemy ADC. This even worked as a quite effective zoning tool in fights as well, because the slow was pretty potent and lasted 5 seconds for some reason. Oh, and to top it all off, this ability was on a 13-second cooldown at release. So by the time that 5-second slow area has ended, it's only got an 8-second cooldown left, even if you built no CDR. So you could just use it on the wave and have it back up once you've cleared, just to beat down anyone who tries to challenge the mighty Shrek. So Cern's 3 hasn't actually changed much since launch. The main thing to note was that this did 90 base damage at rank 1. So yeah, that was definitely too much, especially when you consider you could AA cancel very effectively with this and get out 2 autos plus 90 damage almost instantly for some insane level 3 burst. Other than this, it was a fairly balanced dash though. And finally, Cernunnos' ultimate, the Wild Hunt. This was another reason as to why he was so damn strong at release. Having a massive AoE CC that isn't affected by diminishing returns and was near impossible to miss really was too strong on a hunter. Not to mention it did solid damage as well. So at launch, the AoE of this ability was 30 units. That probably means nothing to most of you, but that's the size of an Odin ultimate. So yeah, it's safe to say unless someone jumps or dashes out of this, it's not going to miss if you put it right on someone. And that someone is now a useless ball that literally can't do anything but run in terror for 2 seconds. And unfortunately for that guy, the person chasing them is not Robert Baratheon and he's going to fist you instead. Even in a 1v1 scenario, this ultimate was solid, but it really was in teamfights where it just became completely nuts. Hitting this on 3 people was almost an auto win for that teamfight unless they all had beads. Having that kind of power on a Hunter ultimate was just insane. Especially when you factor in the rest of Cernunnos' kit and how much damage it could put out. Like, just in the 2 seconds you get a polymorphing, it could probably just kill someone with auto attacks. It was really ridiculous. Alright, so that's Cern's release stats. Let's cover the various nerfs he needed to bring him back into balance and how he got to where he is today. So Cernunnos' first batch of nerfs, as usual with these types of releases, came just one patch after his release, in patch 4.5 on March 28th, 2017, removing the slow on Bramble Blast, which is a bigger nerf than it probably seems. Anyone who played for this release will know how obnoxious that slow was on top of the root for 5 seconds. One of them had to go, and the slow was chosen for that. The lifesteal on Spring Growth was hit for pretty obvious reasons. Having a full item worth of lifesteal for no mana cost or cooldown was not even close to fair, so this was hit at all ranks of the ability pretty significantly. And finally for this patch, they hit his base power by 3, so basically all of his auto attacks now did 3 less damage. About a month later, he was still in obvious need of nerfs, and in patch 4.7 on April 25th, his ultimate was finally hit down from the ridiculous 30 radius that it was before. This may seem like a small nerf, 5 units of range isn't much to take off, right? Not really, since this was the radius of a circle, so taking a small amount off of that radius actually made the area of effect of the ability drastically smaller. And this is actually the size of the ultimate that he still holds today. So you might be wondering where the summer heat nerfs are. Was I overstating how powerful it really was? No, not even close. Patch 4.9 was the start of the summer heat nerfs, taking 10% scaling off from each hit. This was still pretty strong, but definitely was a good nerf, taking probably about 20 to 25 damage off of every auto attack. Plus they also bumped up the Bramble Blast cooldown by 2 seconds here as well. Makes sense. 13 seconds was quite low for such a strong ability, even if you don't consider the slow that was taken off. And in patch 4.14, the second blow to Summer Heat was struck, along with a few other pretty significant nerfs. They once again halved the scaling on Summer Heat. This really just shows how ridiculous this was at release, being 20% scaling. At this point, it became what it should have been at release, a decent bonus to your autos, not a full-on steroid. Given it had 0 cooldown and 0 mana cost, it was ridiculous to be as powerful as it was back then. They touched the base damage early on Horn Charge, mainly to stop that crazy 90 base damage that I mentioned before at rank 1 that it had. And they also hit the cooldown on Wild Hunt, given it was so incredibly powerful. Instead of nerfing its effect further, they decided to just bump up the cooldown to 100 seconds and still keep it with the impact that it had. This actually mattered quite a lot in the grand scheme of things, since most other ADC ultimates were on 90 seconds, meaning you had to play quite careful fighting in the 1v1 as your ult would be on a longer cooldown than theirs would be. So that was actually the last of the nerfs to Cernunnos. It seems in these last couple of patches that people just really wanted rid of him from the meta, and he was over-nerfed a little bit, leading to quite a few small buff patches throughout all of Season 5 to no real effect. But with the release of Season 6 with a whole new meta and itemization choices, along with a couple of direct buffs in patch 6.1, Cernunnos has returned to the meta with a force, and as of this video, he is quite a strong pick in the meta, so rejoice Cernunnos mains. Alright, so that's Cern from his crazy release to being nerfed into the ground and rising up again in Season 6. If you did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and leave any suggestions you have below. But that's it from me. Catch you guys in another video. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.